show you today two different architecture styles before Spring MVC. You can feel the advantages over the decentralized flow. Okay. Basically, if you guys are aware of servlets, right? In case if you want to make any web application using servlets, if you want to make any web application, if you don't have any other choice or if you don't know any framework, if you pick up servlets for implementation, usually in servlets, we will implement using decentralized architecture only, decentralized architecture, servlet-based applications. Simple servlet-based applications are decentralized architecture, which means for every page which is coming from front end, sir, I have a, uh, take any application use case, usually they will have login, registration, login. Then once login, we go to dashboard. From the dashboard, we will go to menu items. There will be a list of links. We will go to each link and we fetch data, we create data, we update, we delete. Lot of get, post, put, delete, such operations we do from each page. So usually a web application should have basic features which are reading data, store it into database. Sometimes your application may need to redirect some pages. Sometimes they need to do save operations, delete operations, update operations. Basic support you should provide from your backend application. So in the backend, when I use servlets, I can able to achieve them. But while using servlets, for every use case, sir, I have registration. For registration, you will be writing one separate servlet. For login, one separate servlet. For dashboard and for menu items, for redirect operations, for CRUD operations, generally we write a separate servlet class for each. When you use this decentralized servlets, the problem is architecture is not centralized. Every request will go to independently a servlets. If you want to apply authentication, or logging or data validations, common validations I have, sir, from every CRUD operation page, I'm getting data. I want to do basic validations like whether that field is empty or not. Such all validations I want to do. There is a common logic, sir, how I can execute it. So to apply common logic and all, again, you need to write filters here using as your servlets are distributed or decentralized. Separately, you created each servlet. So when there is a common operation, you need to write a separate filter here, or you need to write a common class and you should consume here. And coming to login, in each and every page, you need to apply authentication, authorization. So applying common functionality will create more overhead, will create more problem as because they are distributed. Imagine you have a apartment with 10 entries, or if you have a community with 10 entry gates and 10 exit gates. It will be difficult who is coming to that community, who is going out. We can't easily monitor. If we have a common gate, there we can deploy security persons. There they can able to, identify the users or identify the persons who are coming in. So easily they can able to validate who is coming in. They can log who is coming at what time they are coming because we have a common entry. When you don't have common entry, it will be more difficult to trace or authenticate, right? So you need to choose, instead of a decentralized architecture, you should choose a centralized architecture where you will have only one single servlet. Every page request it should take. From there, you should able to handle the subsequent operations for the same CRUD operation application or same application, which is having common functionality. So when I choose a centralized controller here, easily it can able to apply security for all requests which are coming in, going to my business logic. I can able to apply common filters here, logging, validations. any filtering, any such stuff I can able to integrate here. So it will be easy to me to maintain my application. It will be easy if I use a centralized controller, which is taking all the request and processing it. Spring MVC also choose the same centralized architecture pattern. We call it as front controller design pattern. When you use a controller to handle all the requests, right? We will call it as front controller design pattern. When you configure a servlet to handle all your front end request. When you configure only one single controller, we call it as front controller. Front, it will stand in front of all your requests. All your requests will come to this controller only, first controller. This is the front controller which executes for every request. Each and every request will be navigated through front controller only. So it will be easy to me to monitor or secure or log, to do anything. It will be easy to me as all the requests are coming in here. I can able to adopt or I can able to add some functionality on top of this centralized controller to achieve common required operations, commonly which I want to execute for each and every request. So front controller design pattern Spring MVC followed, and they created one servlet. Instead, you writing so many servlet classes, right? Spring provided one servlet. The servlet class name is dispatcher servlet. This dispatcher servlet you should configure as a front controller. While you are designing web application using Spring MVC, right? You need to use dispatcher servlet as a front controller. What it will do, every request it will accept. And for that particular request, specific controller logic it will execute. Controller, you know, right? Responsibility of controller business, DAO. Controller will do all the read operations. Once a servlet gets request here, dispatch a servlet from your input page. Let's say I have registration page. From registration, I submitted a request. First, the request will go to your server, Tomcat. Tomcat will forward the same request to dispatcher servlet. Then dispatcher servlet will share the request to your controller, specific controller. There is a registration controller. Yes, it will send data to registration controller. There you can read data, then you can forward to business to DAO. Finally, you can persist your data into database. Every request need to map to dispatcher servlet. It is a predefined servlet. Do I need to implement this class? Nothing. It's a predefined servlet class. It's already provided in the form of Spring Web jar file. Just add the jar file to your application and you can just keep it into your web.xml file as a front controller. Where should I configure this? Under web.xml file. You will be having one web.xml file. Under that web.xml file, you will be configuring it. Under web.xml file as a front controller, we configure it. All the configurations belongs to dispatcher servlet or mapping. All front-end forms need to map to this dispatcher servlet. All front-end requests. To whom we should inform? To server, your Tomcat server. Because every request, when you enter your domain URL and when you click on a link, first it will redirect to your machine and your server. Server will get the information from web.xml file. It will ask or it will read web.xml file and understands, okay, which class I need to execute first. So your web.xml file should tell to Tomcat, right? Server, it should tell to Tomcat that there is a dispatcher servlet, you execute that. Who need to configure that? We, as a developer, we configure in web.xml file using URL pattern, right? URL pattern, we use URL pattern something star, means any request. Star, for that star, we will configure dispatcher servlet. Using star, we map. So that means we are telling Tomcat that any request, any URL pattern you accept, that redirect to dispatcher servlet. You redirect it to dispatcher servlet. So from web.xml file, Tomcat will understand which controller need to execute first. Okay. Now request will come to your servlet, which servlet, dispatcher servlet. Then it will take it forward to your Spring classes. It will take it forward to your Spring classes. All the remaining part of your application, all this part we will be implementing using Spring only. You know what I should use for controllers are @controller. For business, @service. For DAO, @repository. And additionally, I have configurations and some other helper classes. You may know with configuration and component. So you know from here, the remaining portion, how it will execute. Okay. So now as these all are the classes, somebody should create objects. Sir, who is creating object for this servlet? By reading your servlet class from web.xml file, Tomcat is going to create a dispatcher servlet object. Dispatcher servlet belongs to Spring only, but Spring is not going to create a dispatcher servlet object. It is a pure servlet class implemented using servlet API. Dispatcher servlet implementation belongs to servlet API. This is belongs to servlet API. So if you choose a servlet must need to be created and managed by Tomcat. That's why if you see even in Spring Boot also, while we are designing web applications or REST microservices, a built-in Tomcat they given. Why Tomcat? When you question that, Tomcat is required because built-in dispatcher servlet object somebody should create. So servlet only component in Java which can able to accept a request from front ends. Any request you are sending from your browser, to read that request, Tomcat definitely required a servlet. So in servlets only we can able to read this HTTP protocol data. So whatever data sent via HTTP protocol, what kind of methods we have? We have get to, post to, put to, delete to, options, head to. Mostly we will use the first four methods. Mostly we will use first four methods. In rare scenarios, we can go with head and options also. Okay. So we will get that information into Tomcat. Tomcat will create a dispatcher servlet object. Tomcat will take care of object creation of dispatcher servlet. Tomcat itself is a container. It's a server. The server will do what? It will create dispatcher servlet object and it will manage dispatcher servlet. Now, apart from dispatcher servlet, I'm going to write controllers, business, DAO classes, right, sir? Who will create objects to them? Here, your IOC will pitch in. Your IOC is going to create all the objects of your Spring classes. So all Spring classes objects are managed by your IOC container. IOC server, I will name it. Because this is Tomcat server, web server, and we are going to use IOC server. This is Spring implementation, right? You know IOC classes. You know IOC classes, what are available. So which IOC server we will use or which IOC container we will use? Web application context. Web application context is the container that we are going to use. Something like your application context only. Okay. Web application context is the container that we are going to use. Web application context. What it will do? Web application context will do what? It will scan all your classes. You know, component scanning will be performed. It will scan all your classes and it will create objects to them. It will create objects to your classes. It can do dependency injection to your classes. All that responsibility will taken care by web application context container. Sir, where should I write? Do I need to write a main method and should I load all these classes into that IOC container? Not required. Okay. So this IOC container will started from dispatcher servlet. Dispatcher servlet is having code already. In this dispatcher servlet, already we are having code to start. You know what is the code? Application context AP equal to new class path XML application context we write. Correct? So the similar logic we have in dispatcher servlet. Under a dispatcher servlet, we have this logic to start IOC container. So when you see from the deployment point of view, when you start your IOC server will create objects for your dispatcher servlet by reading web.xml file. Your Tomcat is going to create dispatcher servlet object. Dispatcher servlet is going to create IOC object. Dispatcher servlet is going to create IOC object. Further, do I need to provide any XML, sir? Yes, you can provide simple Spring XML file. Can provide simple Spring XML file here. So by reading configurations from Spring XML file, it can able to start your IOC container. Maybe XML based configuration or pure annotation based configurations also you may have. So it will read your XML file, right? Who dispatcher servlet, and it will start your IOC container, which is very important step, right? Which is very important step. IOC container, IOC container object is going to created by dispatcher servlet only. Dispatcher servlet object is going to created by Tomcat. Okay. So first Tomcat will create object for dispatcher servlet. Dispatcher servlet will create object for your IOC container. Why it need to start IOC container? Because each and every request is coming, you know, object's importance. Front end request, data coming from front end, that data I need in my controllers, DAOs everywhere. So you need a servlet here. So whichever data coming from front end, servlet will read first. Then servlet need to talk to your controllers, right? Servlet need to talk to your controller. So your controller object anywhere required in servlet. So how servlet will get your controller object? Via your application context. Already your servlet's init method will execute this. Means while your servlet starting itself, in the start stage itself, it will start your IOC container. IOC container is going to create all your objects, controllers, business, DAO, everything it will create, all automatic. Auto wiring also it will perform. Auto wiring also performed here. Objects creation performed, auto wiring performed, everything. Everything is performed. Objects creation. And auto wiring also will be performed here. Objects creation performed and auto wiring also performed. Objects will be created here. IOC will load and create objects, and as well as IOC will do automatic dependency injection using auto wiring concept. So everything is ready. All the objects are ready for your request. They will wait. They will send. They will ask, come on, send me any request. We will handle it. Once application is ready, right? Once all these objects are created, they will wait. So now one of user requested for registration page. When he request servlet, this container, just a minute, guys. Hello? Hey, just a minute. Give me 2 minutes. Yeah. So every request, object creation cycle, right? How it will happen once you implement your application. Generally, you will be writing only controller business and DO classes, your controllers business DO classes. So when you start your server, okay, server will read this uh, XML file first, web.xml file. I'm just changing color, object creation cycle, right? So first it will read web.xml file. From web.xml file, it will understand which servlet object need to be created. Then the servlet object will be initialized by Tomcat. Tomcat will create object for your servlet. Then immediately dispatcher servlet will read Spring XML file. It will read your Spring XML file and it will start your IOC server. It will start your IOC container. Then IOC container will create objects to your controllers. Maybe in any order, right? Service, DAO class objects. It will create all the objects. Then immediately what it will do, it will identify the dependency between those classes and it will do the dependency injection as well. So this is the process that it will execute first. This is the process that it will execute first. It will execute this process first. Yeah. If you see the cycle now, entire cycle. So first server will be started. Server read web.xml file, creates dispatcher servlet objects. Dispatcher servlet will read Spring XML file. It will start IOC container. IOC container create your objects and as well as it will do dependency injection. Dependency injection. It will do dependency injection. It will do dependency injection or you may call auto wiring. So it will do all the dependency injections. Now, actually end user request will start. Maybe landing page. When you enter a URL, right? First thing what will happen? A landing page will be loaded. You all know that landing page is index.html or whichever page you configured in web.xml file. A landing page will be loaded. From that landing page, user interactions will start. Okay. First, user wants to do registration. When he click on registration page, maybe registration page will be loaded. Then he will fill the form and he submits to server. Then from server, the request will go to dispatcher servlet first. Now here, the architecture you should understand. How dispatcher servlet will act. Once a request is submitted from front end, how dispatcher servlet will take it forward to controllers. How we do that mapping here. Dispatcher servlet mainly it is having two helper classes. Okay. So in the architecture or in the implementation of dispatcher servlet itself, it is using two classes. One class is handler mapping and the other class is view resolver. Just helper classes to dispatcher servlet. Handler mapping and view resolver. HM and VR. This HM and VR will help a lot to this servlet. Dispatcher servlet. What they do? Handler mapping will help to this dispatcher servlet, which controller need to execute it. The handler mapping responsibility is when dispatcher servlet gets a request. What request? Any form, maybe registration form or a simple load request or a get request, put, delete any request which is coming from front end. Once the request is given to dispatcher servlet, it will ask handler mapping, hey, what I should do next? When it asks handler mapping will guide which controller need to be executed. So who will instruct handler mapping as a developer? We instruct. We give instructions to handler mapping. Handler mapping will share same instructions to dispatcher servlet. Actually, you are the developer. You know for what page, what controller should execute it. I have a registration page. For that registration page, registration controller should be executed. As a developer, I should be mapping, right, sir? Yes, you only doing mapping. But you will be giving your mappings to handler mapping class, not to dispatcher servlet directly. You will give your instructions to handler mapping. Where do I do, sir? Do we have any separate configurations file for it? Not. In Spring XML file itself, we configure handler mapping in case of XML approach. In annotations, they made it simple. Simple request mapping is itself a handler mapping. Simple request mapping annotation itself is a handler mapping in annotations. But in XML approach, we used to configure a handler mapping class in Spring XML file. So when there is a request from server to or from front end to your dispatcher servlet, it will ask handler mapping, what controller I should execute. So as a developer, you given already instructions to handler mapping, it will tell go to so and so controller and execute it. Okay. Then dispatcher servlet forwards your request to controller. From here, you know that already you did via your coding. So as per your code, controller flow will go to business, business flow will go to DAO, DAO flow will go to DB. The entire flow will complete and finally it will give response back. Not only taking request, right? Controller finally will give a response object back. The response always controller will give in the form of I turn one this side. Okay. So the controller will give response back in the form of right in the form of model and view object. We call it as model and view MAV. Model and view object. Finally, it will give one object as a response back. Who will feed information into that object? Again, developer only. Okay. So wherever information is required, developer only will be providing that information. So controller will return data in the form of model and view object to dispatcher servlet. Right? Handler mapping given instruction to dispatcher servlet, execute a controller. So your request will go to controller, controller take it to business, business to DAO. Finally, it will persist your data. Done. And finally, you should give response back, all right? Whether operations become success or failed. You need to inform. Otherwise, front end don't know that your operation executed or failed. So finally, you will be sending a model and view object as a response to servlet. What it will contain, sir? Model and view will contain output page name and as well as very important to understand the remaining you entirely understands very well. You need to understand model and view also. What is this model and view? Model and view contains model and view. This model and view object contains what? It contains output page. You need to give output page, right? Output page name plus some data in the form of map object. One map object it will give. You know, map holds key value pair, right? In that key value pair, you can give output data. Output data. You can give a output page name and output page data as well. Output page name, page data. Your model and view object contains this. Your model and view object contains this. Output page name and output data. Who is giving it to whom? Your controller is giving it to dispatcher servlet. Okay, you given output page name and output page data. Then what is the need of view resolver here? We give only output page name, not exact location. Your output page is maybe there in your web INF page or web content, inside web content, output pages or response pages, inside response pages, employee pages or student pages. There may be, in different directory or in different folder, you must have stored them. So what is the location and which output page types you are using? Those are configurables, because today I might be using JSP. Tomorrow I may want to change to some other technology, theme leaf, or a different technology I want to use. Today I am keeping my output pages into one folder. Tomorrow I may want to migrate them to a different folder. So that's where view resolver is helping. Via view resolver, we will tell what is the output page and what is the output page extension. View resolver will help to dispatcher servlet. Okay, you got model and view object from controller, right? For that model and view, I'll guide you which output page from which location you need to pick up. View resolver is the one who is giving output page location and extensions to dispatcher servlet. It will tell go to success folder and identify with this name. Output page name already received, right? With this output page name, let's say your page name is registration success. REG success is my page name. So view resolver will tell that go to some success folder, find out REG success file in that success folder with the .jsp extension. If somebody come to your place and ask for your address, a postman came to your village and asked for your address, some of your neighbors, or he asked someone, then he will guide. Go to so and so location and ask there, or find out a home, or his surname is so and so. You ask with that. So easily you will able to identify. Similar way, view resolver will guide your dispatcher servlet. Go to so and so output page location, find out so and so extension output page. So finally, dispatcher servlet will get your output page name. Done. It got the output page name. Then it will inform to Tomcat, I got an output page. You redirect it. Then your Tomcat, as UI and backend code, everything is there right in your code. It will pick up that UI page and it will send as a response finally. That's it. Every request will happen in the same way. We will get request from front end to Tomcat. Tomcat will send it to dispatcher servlet. Dispatcher servlet will ask handler mapping which controller need to be executed. And as a developer, you already given instructions to handler mapping. It will give right proper controller. So the controller will take request. Controller will take it forward to business, business to DAO. Finally, you will get response back from controller to dispatch the servlet in the form of model and view, which holds your output page name and output page response data. After registration, I want to send some message, sir. Your registration success and one ID is generated. You joined as a student. For you, we generated one ID. So I want to send that ID as a response. You need to put your ID into map object with key value pair. Key is ID, value, you can put any dynamic value. And output page name, something success. That both will be sent from controller. Map object you will be composing here as a developer, you are writing and sending it to dispatcher servlet. View resolver will guide which output page need to pick up. Who will write that output page, or who will write code in the output page or UI? We only. We only designed this output page. In that output page, we will collect data from this map object and we will display to the user. That's it. Every use case will execute in the same fashion. Once again, I'll repeat it, okay? So when you use a decentralized architecture, by using a servlet, when we use centralized architecture by using a servlet, we call it as a front controller design pattern. Spring MVC used front controller design pattern and created one servlet, which is dispatcher servlet. By using servlet implementation only, they created it. So you need to configure this dispatcher servlet as a front controller. And where do we configure it? In a web.xml file by using URL pattern expression star, so that every request will be mapped to dispatcher servlet only. That is what Tomcat will understand by reading this file. Okay. So Tomcat will create object for your dispatcher servlet. As soon as you start your server, it reads web.xml file and creates dispatcher servlet object. Then dispatcher servlet immediately read your Spring XML file and creates IOC object. then IOC will not wait. Immediately, it will read all your classes. It will read all your classes and creates objects. Then dependency injection also it will perform. So I started Tomcat. Then Tomcat started dispatcher servlet. Dispatcher servlet started IOC. IOC created all the objects and dependency injection. So your application is ready. All the objects are ready for you. Ready for your request. Server side, everything is ready. Just they will wait for your request. Okay. When you submit a request, request will go to Tomcat. Tomcat will send it to dispatcher servlet. Then dispatcher servlet will ask handler mapping, which controller need to be executed. So all that mappings you will be doing in Spring XML file itself as a developer, which controller need to be executed for which page. I have a page A, sir. For page A controller I have. For B page, B controller. For C page, C controller. So you'll be doing all that configurations in Spring XML file via handler mapping. So the handler mapping is finally going to help dispatcher servlet which controller need to be executed. As you already configured, it identifies which controller need to be executed and your request will go to controller. From here, I need not explain. You know how the flow goes. Finally, when you get the response back to controller, it will return in the form of model and view to your dispatcher servlet. Model and view holds your output page name, only page name, and one map object. Map object is for your response. Sir, which data I can put into map object? Map object can hold anything. Sir, can I put one ID into map? You can put. Can I put one entire object into the map? You can put. Can I put thousands of requests or thousands of objects into map? You can put. Map can hold simple primitives. Map can hold simple objectives. Map can hold connections also. Yeah, another collection object you can put as a output data, a list object. List of employees data I want to display. Put it in map object. Give ID, employee list, value, give the list, actual list, which is having list of employees that we can read in UI. Yes, anything we can read. By using tag libraries or by using JSPs, we can read. Not only plain HTML, right? For front end, we can use JSPs or other tag libraries we can use to read dynamic data. Yes. So finally, we will get response and we can handle it. Sir, what about redirections? Yes, you can do simple redirections. Sir, I don't have this entire flow. I just want to get a request and redirect it. You can do that. Usually applications will have which kind of operations? Logins, registrations, redirections, maybe get some data and display, or sometimes you may need to create some data. That is what all we do from front end to back end. Between we may execute some authentication authorizations. That's it. Okay. So this is how the entire flow will happen in Spring MVC. This is how entire flow will happen in Spring MVC. Hope you guys clear, right? I'll show you example. I'll show you one example.